Real Madrid is a side renowned for their big-name signings. Some of the most prolific names in the sport, like Raúl, Zinedine Zidane, Luis Figo, Cristiano Ronaldo, Kaká, Gareth Bale, and so many more have worn the Los Blancos shirt at the peak of their careers and had the pleasure of being dubbed one of the most coveted titles in world football, a Galactico. But that seems to be changing. When it comes to clubs that nurture youth talents and produce footballers who come to dominate the game for years, Real Madrid hardly cracks the top 10. If you weren't an avid fan of the club, you'd be surprised to hear that the club has a youth academy of its own, and a popular one at that. What makes this an even more interesting find is that the Los Blancos' youth academy, La Fábrica, has produced its fair share of renowned talents. The likes of Samuel Eto'o, Juan Mata, Iker Casillas, and Guti were all products of this academy, and each one has at least one UCL winners medal in their collection. So, there's proof that this academy works and does produce its fair share of talents. However, an academy product coming through the ranks and breaking into the first team isn't what the average fan pictures when they think of Madrid. Over to the seaside in Barcelona. That is the order of the day all day, every day. It's why the La Masia Academy is more popular than La Fábrica. Youth talents break into the Barcelona first team every other Tuesday. In fact, following the reshaping of the club after the exit of Lionel Messi, youth has been front and center of the project. We've seen the likes of Gavi, Pedri, Alejandro Balde, and even the current crop of talents like Fermin Lopez, Lamine Yamal, Pau Cubarsí, Ronaldo Rayo, and Nico Martinez, and so on become regular starters in the space of a few years. But that's hardly the same at Real Madrid. Instead, the bulk of La Fábrica talents are shipped out to other clubs on loans or sold outright. If you still can't believe Real would do that, keep in mind that Samuel Eto'o won a UCL trophy with Barcelona. We're talking about the same club that binned off Martin Ødegaard for less than half the price Arsenal paid to land Kai Havertz. The club has seemingly gotten away with cashing in on its academy talents for years with little to no drawbacks. So they aren't pressed to stop now. And even now, when their focus is turned to youth, La Fábrica graduates still aren't the first pick of the lot. To understand how Real Madrid got away with such a horrendous youth development policy, you must go back to the dawn of the Galacticos era. It all began, as most success stories do, with a man on a mission. His name is Florentino Perez. In 2000, he became the president of Real Madrid and kick-started the first Galactico era, in which the club's player recruitment and development prioritized immediate success above everything else. See, at this point, Real Madrid were in a financial slump like Barcelona's recent financial woes. The club needed a financial injection to remain competitive and the right crop of players to ensure enough success to get through the hard times. This cash injection came via the sale of executive boxes and the club's image rights, with 7.5% and 12.5% shares acquired by Caja Madrid and Media Pro respectively. Perez got down to business immediately in a spending spree that spanned 2000 to 2005. This saw several high-profile signings like David Beckham, Luis Figo, Ronaldo, Claude Makelele, and Zinedine Zidane moving to the Bernabeu. Other class acts like Sergio Ramos, Robinho, and Michael Owen would follow afterward on the fringes of the first Galacticos era. Suffice it to say that with so many big names at the club, youth development was completely overshadowed. But that wasn't the only thing wrong with Los Blancos at the time. Since the club was financially pressed to produce results, more of its resources were channeled into getting attacking players, which led to a structural imbalance in the team. This wasn't just a coincidence. It was the policy, and it had a name, Zidane's y Barbones, which meant the club could get a bunch of fancy attackers and pile them on its workaholic defenders. Cracks started to show in the project, when funds that could have gone into securing a new contract for Claude Makelele were used to pinch David Beckham from Manchester United instead. This was the inside force that helped Barcelona leapfrog the Los Blancos side. Perez would ultimately leave Real Madrid in 2005, before returning some 4 years later to restart the Galacticos project. This time though, the high-profile signings were even pricier. They had to be to keep up with the madness that Pep Guardiola was working up with Barcelona. In came the likes of Kaká for the current price of a Kai Havertz. But the second Galacticos era wasn't off to a stunning start, as the Brazilian left the Bernabeu with only a single league and Copa del Rey title to his name. But that motivated Perez to spend more, bringing in arguably the best iteration of the Galacticos, with the likes of Karim Benzema, Cristiano Ronaldo, Luka Modric, Toni Kroos, Gareth Bale, and so on. The results were clear as day: 4 UCL trophies in 5 years, taking the club total to 6 since the project was revisited. Success would follow the club for years, with the second generation of Galacticos outlasting the first and being generally more successful. But this impeccable run of form wasn't due to new tactics or changes in policies for the project. Instead, it was more about the individual quality and longevity of the players involved. But even the best things come to an end, and so did the second Galacticos era. Cristiano Ronaldo left for Juventus, Benzema was shipped out to the Saudi Pro League, Gareth Bale has since retired, and Luka Modric and Toni Kroos have become too old for the club to rely on them week in, week out. Thankfully, Perez seemed to have gotten it just right with the second project, because it helped Real Madrid claw its way back to relevance, especially as their Catalan rivals fell short financially. Sometime in 2015, Florentino Perez turned off the faucet to the club's seemingly unending account. This was a calculated move deserving of all the credit it was due. Perez wanted a new generation of Galacticos, but not the kind requiring him to cut huge checks. Considering how financial fair play rules are strictly enforced these days, with clubs punished massively, like in the case of Chelsea and Everton, this decision to cut on player spending was genius and ahead of its time. Another reason this decision made sense was because players were starting to become more expensive. So, getting high-profile names to fly the Galacticos flag would have cost the club dearly. For perspective, Real Madrid clinched the signatures of both Kaká and Ronaldo for the same price that Barcelona splashed to land Philippe Coutinho, who unraveled at the Catalan giants and never lived up to his price tag. Building on the success of the second era of Galacticos, Perez now prioritized longevity over instant success. The club was big enough and had the talent to still be competitive, but it had to ensure that the replacements for the past era could fill the huge shoes left behind by their predecessors. For this, Perez chose wisely to invest in youth, building a team that could serve the club for a decade or more. The club isn't just targeting random prospects either, but some of the best young talents who've proved to be resounding successes year after year. First, it was Vinicius Jr. being poached from Flamengo in 2018. Then, a year later, Rodrigo follows from Santos. By 2020, the club welcomed Eduardo Camavinga from Rennes, who was soon followed by AS Monaco wonderkid Aurelien Tchouameni. What makes these youth signings outright successes is that Real Madrid secured their signatures for virtually nothing. Camavinga sent the Los Blancos back some 31 million euros, while Vinicius and Rodrigo both cost 45 million euros. Around this time, the club also recruited the services of Antonio Rudiger, David Alaba, and Thibaut Courtois. Rudiger and Alaba arrived as free agents, and the club only coughed up 35 million euros for Courtois. Essentially, barring Eden Hazard and Luka Jovic, the club has managed to keep its spending under 50 million euros since 2014. But that changed again in 2022 and 2023, when the club had to fend off competition to land Tchouameni and parted with an eye-watering 80 million euros. Like the club didn't already have a stacked starting 11, Perez went all out to secure the services of Jude Bellingham, splashing a whopping 103 million euros on the midfielder, excluding add-ons. Compare this spending trend to Barcelona under Josep Maria Bartomeu, who got power drunk on the insane 222 million euros they got out of the Neymar sale. Rather than stick to their model that helped them soar over their Madrid rivals in the first place, they adopted Perez's first-generation Galactico strategy in the transfer market. This led to the signing of Antoine Griezmann, Ousmane Dembélé and Philippe Coutinho, all of whom endured lackluster spells at Camp Nou. Bellingham has already hit the ground running in his debut season, showing his ability to rise to the challenge. Don't forget that he is just 20 years old and is arguably on par with some of the Galacticos of the past. Behind the Englishman are French talents Aurelien Tchouameni and the versatile Eduardo Camavinga, who had adapted to life at the Bernabeu pretty well. Even better, they learned from one of the best in the business, Casemiro, before replacing him in the squad. Their double pivot makes Bellingham the spearhead in attack, making up for the lack of a central striker since Benzema's exit. Leading the pack are Rodrigo and Vinicius Jr., also young and gradually introduced into the squad until they grew into their roles. With an Mbappe transfer likely this summer, Real Madrid could easily be looking at an even more lethal attack than the Ronaldo, Benzema, Bale trio. Taking in the big picture of the Los Blancos' current squad, targets and overall priorities, you start to notice that the old Galactico footprint never left. This new team brimming with young talents is still being built on the backs of overworked, injury-prone defenders who are further along in age. It's why we've seen the likes of Camavinga and Valverde being played out of position several times. It's still ultimately a Perez build, and although the apple did fall and start to roll away from the tree, it didn't get too far. Ultimately though, the positives outweigh the negatives. These youngsters have over a decade to grow and gel together in a way that Figo, Beckham, Zidane, and every other high-profile Galactico with egos the size of planets never could. And there's still ample time for Perez to fix the defensive flaws in his plans. The third time's the charm, eh?